Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Top 10 Songs in the Co-Captain's Chair. Miss Sydney Taylor. Hello, Sydney, once again. Didn't I just
Yeah,
see you like recently? It's like,
we really just got done filming something else or like hopping on here.
yeah, we do. That's what we do here on Sea of Tranquility. We get together and we record multiple shows, and then by the
Oh,
time we're done, we're completely fried and ready for bed. It's like,
man.
especially me. This is three in a row for me tonight, so I'm like, and then I have three in a row tomorrow night too. I'm like, what am I getting myself into here? I'm going to
Oh
be ready
boy.
for the weekend. Oh yeah. So, but anyway, tonight we are doing a show, our favorite songs of Mr. Big, a band who's been around since the very late '80s, somewhat of a super group. They've had some stops and starts, some lineup changes. Unfortunately, a death within the ranks not that long ago in Pat Torpey, but a band that very, very talented. Lots of really good songs. For me, some very spotty albums, but there's plenty to like and love throughout the catalog. And I mean, let's face it, Paul Gilbert and Billy Sheehan together in any band is a pretty good thing. And even
A
when,
match.
yeah, right, absolutely. And even when Paul left for a few years and Richie Kotzen came in, I mean, those guys, obviously went on and put the Winery Dogs together many years later. But so I think, instrumentally wise, some pretty splendid playing on these albums and great vocals. I mean, Eric Martin, really good singer. Pat, obviously a great drummer. I think there were a lot of greatness that happened on these albums. I just personally, and Sydney and I were talking about this before we went live. I find a lot of these albums kind of samey, although littered with some really, really good songs. So we
Yeah.
figured we're going to do a top 10 song show because I have enough favorites from the catalog that it was kind of really fun to put this together. So I've got a few honorable mentions as well, but we'll kick it off with Sydney's number 10.
Yeah, so yeah, first off, I mean, I love Billy Sheehan. I mean, I love Richie Kotzen too, which I'm gonna get into that with my number 10. And honestly, just like such a talented, yeah, like group of people together, musician-wise, even, when Richie came in. And yeah, so my first one is gonna be on that note. I have Shine from the album Actual Size. This is the album that came out in 2001. Of course, is Richie Kotzen filling in. And it's really funny because I was actually listening to the Winery Dogs today, and I didn't even like I forgot just like the connection because we were doing this tonight. But man, I mean, I love Richie Kotzen and Billy Sheehan together. I think that they just are so talented. I mean, Richie Kotzen in and of himself is just a phenomenal musician and very underrated in my opinion. I feel like his
Yeah.
talents a lot of the time just go so unnoticed. And I mean, there are definitely some good songs off of this record. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's my favorite record that Richie Kotzen has ever done. There's some good songs, and I wanted to include one. It's actually funny. We just mentioned we kind of took a break. We filmed something else and came back, and I actually switched this last minute because I felt bad not putting this on here, and because I do love Richie Kotzen so much, and I think that song is good melodic song. It's off of that album. It's not a super memorable record, but to me, I mean, there's a couple of standouts, and that track is one of them. So Shine from Actual Size is going to be my number 10.
Cool. Yeah, that's not a bad album, actually. It's,
Yeah,
I think, better than we might have expected, right? And
right.
kind of listening to it, you know, after hearing like Winery Dogs, I think you go back and listen to that record, and it's just like, okay, it kind of maybe almost is like a precursor to what we got
Yeah,
with
it's like a
Winery Dogs in a
starter.
weird way, right? And I think that Richie brought a lot of funkiness to this band because
Yeah.
Richie is a pretty funky player, and as much as he could be a shred guy too, I think at his core he's more of like kind of like an R&B and funk guy, as we've seen throughout his solo career. So, and definitely brings that to the Winery Dogs as well. So that's a good choice. I went with for my number 10. I'm going to go to their 2010 kind of big return of the original lineup,
Yep.
the What If album, which is this one right here with the kind of strange album cover there on Frontiers Records. Undertow, which is the leadoff song. That's one thing I think this band was great at. They put excellent first tracks on all their albums. Like almost
Agreed.
every album starts off with a bang. I think Undertow is that for this album. It's a big chorus, tons of melody, big meaty riffs. I love Billy's bass playing. I like a band that lets the bass player be heard and heard in a big way. And he's not only does he have a big beefy tone, but he's just a virtuoso. So I love Paul's riffs, his bass, the never-ending groove. And that's another thing about this band I want to make sure that we talk about. Say what you want about, maybe not all their albums are great start to finish, and maybe there's kind of a sameness to a lot of their albums and tracks, but there's so much groove in these songs. I
Yeah.
mean, Billy and Pat, there's like a thump to all of these albums and all these songs that you have to give a lot of credit to. And I think Undertow is definitely that for me. So that's my number 10, Undertow from the What If album.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because that was my number 10 originally before I went back and
Oh,
changed
really?
it. That's really, I was like, you were saying it, I was like, he's not going to pick that song. Like, that's just a coincidence, right? Yeah, that was my number 10. I switched some stuff around, but no, I completely agree. That's such a fantastic opening track.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get into that because I have a song from that a little later on in my list. I think that was such a great kind of like comeback, if you want to say comeback. It was, a little bit of like a comeback of the original lineup. I think for that, it was such a strong record. So I'll get back into that a little bit though. My number 9 is going to be The Price You Gotta Pay from the album Bump Ahead from 1993. Definitely one of the heavier songs on my list. I think it has a really cool bluesy edge, kind of touching back to that kind of same, kind of groove that this album really has. And that was, of course, written by Torpy and Sheehan and Gilbert. So kind of like a lot of the musicianship that we were talking about, I feel like really comes out in a lot of those types of songs, and especially this one. Not one of my all-time favorites again, which is why it's my number 9. But I think it's got a really cool groove to this song, and was a standout track for me on that record from '93. So that's going to be my number 9 pick.
That's a really solid album too, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe their last of the really strong early albums, perhaps. Yeah. It's a good one. There's a lot of good songs on there. I went into, let's go back to the Lean Into It album. This is my number 9, Live and Kickin'. I mean, again, those monster grooves, that ultra catchy chorus I'm sitting here talking about, and all I can hear, coming to the live and kickin'. I'm like, yeah, it's just so great. I mean, one thing about this band, throughout their catalog, this is fun music. This is upbeat, party rock, party hard rock, with lots of grooves, lots of really good choruses. I mean, they know how to put a good melody together. I love the guitar riffs on this song. And, you got to give credit to Eric Martin. I mean, the guy's got a really soulful voice, I think sometimes too, just in my opinion, sometimes I think his vocals were a little bit too soulful for this band. That's the reason why they never sounded any heavier than they got. But maybe that was the point of it all, right? But great vocal, great song, killer chorus, monster groove, Alive and Kickin', my number 9.
That's a great one. Was that the lead off track of that record too, or?
No, I think it was a little bit of the album, I think. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say I couldn't remember if that was a lead off track, but no, I completely agree. I think that chorus is so catchy. It really is. It gets in you. That's a great song, great pick.
Actually, the lead off track is coming up on my list, so I'm giving it all away right there. I went and looked. I'm like, oh, there it is. That's the one.
Yeah. So my number 8 is going to be off of the Lean Into It record as well. I'm going to go with Just Take My Heart. Oh, I'm a sucker for melodic ballads. I really am. I know that I feel like I'm going to sound like Lynn. Like, it's like,
Lynn, are you watching?
It's like, I'm a girl. I know it's expected that I like melodic, but I really do. And I think that me and Pete were even talking about this too before we started recording, is that I feel like this band also did such a great job at putting together those types of songs. And I have quite a few of them on my list, just because I really loved the way that they did certain ballads. They were really great at making just things like very, very melodic. I don't know, like in a way that I feel like was different than a lot of other bands, just unique sounding. I don't even know how to like really properly describe that. But I think that they do a great job at that. So I love this song, a great ballad off of that record. Again, we just talked about that. I think that's definitely one of the stronger records of the first, 3 that they have. And so, yeah, that's going to be my number 8.
I'd argue that that's their best album.
It's a good one.
Yeah. It is really good. And it was their biggest selling album. And, you're right. These guys did ballads very well. I mean, probably because of Eric Martin, right? I mean, he had the perfect voice. And that's maybe that's my issue with this band always, is that his voice is very suitable to that style music. And he wasn't he wasn't at times, for me anyway, aggressive enough for the for the heavier songs, for the more
Yeah.
frantic and hard rock and stuff. So it's almost like a battle of like, what kind of stuff should we really be doing? But they did it all really well. So you really can't complain at that. But I just, when he sings those type of songs, he's absolutely the man for the job.
Yeah.
Sometimes I felt like his vocals weren't kind of rocking enough for some of the heavier
Well,
tracks.
you listen to the heavier tracks too, like even like Price You Gotta Pay. And I feel like maybe, yeah, if you didn't have him vocally, which sounds like messed up because we love you, Eric, but if there was somebody else vocally, I feel like that song might have maybe come across heavier to me. Do you know, like
Yeah.
certain songs I feel like maybe would be heavier, yeah, if it did have a different vocal approach, but because it wasn't, it was kind of, I feel like a lot of the songs were kind of really all sang in like the same sort of style, like you could transfer like the vocal stylings of a ballad to like some of these heavier songs. And so for that,
Yeah.
it kind of tones it down a little bit than how
Yeah.
it was
I mean,
being.
it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of the conundrum that I've always had with this band. It's
Yeah.
like, because I like him as a vocalist. I do. I just wonder if, at times he would have tried something a little bit different, or maybe that just wasn't his thing. Right. I mean,
Right.
that's the type of singer he was. So I don't know.
Yeah.
My number 8, I'm going to go back to the debut from 1989, which is another fine album, probably my second favorite album from them. Big Love. Great chorus. I
Oh,
mean, and another thing I really like about this band is that Sheehan and Gilbert sang some really good backing vocals. I think really strong. And it almost to me like kind of like how Michael Anthony was in Van Halen. I think these two guys
right.
were in this band. And I think the backing vocals on this track are just absolutely dynamite. Billy Sheehan's bass is so huge in the mix on this first album. Just absolutely love it. And then you got that soulful lead vocal from Eric. It's just a great song. It's pretty heavy, but it's really catchy, like all their stuff is. So,
Yeah.
but I had a hard time not picking my entire list from those first two albums.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
I could have
Yes.
easily done that, right?
Oh man.
There's
I was
great
gonna
stuff
say,
throughout their catalog, but man, those first two albums are just loaded with good songs. So I
it
was
was,
like,
we were talking, the last one we did was Black Label Society, and I was joking like, oh, I had to, the blessed how I had, had to put everything on that from the album on my list. And it was the same thing with this one. I kept going back to the first record just because I love that debut so much, and I kept going back, and I was like, you have to divvy it up a little bit, like go in and So
yeah.
it's really funny that you were struggling with the same thing.
Yeah, it's funny. And then my honorable mentions is filled with like almost every other track from both of those albums. It's like, oh, geez. So yeah, I had to stop myself. I'm like, all right, I got to give some love to the rest of the albums because there's actually a lot of really good songs that I love from the other albums. So
Yeah. So number 7, I'm gonna go with what originally was my number 10. I'm gonna go with Undertow off of that record, What If. Such a great start to that record, like Pete mentioned earlier. Really a strong comeback record for them. I don't even know if comeback's the right word, but I guess it is. It's,
yeah, I mean, they're the original lineup back again.
I
And
think that was this was the first record that Paul Gilbert was on to in a while
yeah,
since I think it was like 96 or something was the last record he was on until this one. So this was the comeback of all of them together, and just a super strong record. I think that this, maybe it's just also mixed with like the modern production. I feel like this album seems a little bit heavier to me than a lot of the previous records in the late 80s, early 90s. But just a great song to start off the record with. It's got melody, it's heavy, and kind of just gets you right into the record. So that's going to be my number 7.
cool. Yeah, I love that
Yeah,
song. It's a really good album, I think. All
agreed.
right, so my number 7, I'm gonna go back to the album you talked about before, Actual Size from 2001. So this is the second album with Richie Kotzen on guitar and a little bit of vocals, and I love this song. It's called Suffocation.
Oh, so good.
It's so heavy. It's so funky. It's almost like, I mean, to me, Kotzen is like almost like a white prince because
Yeah.
he knows how to play that funky, like soulful stuff. And, he's a really great singer. And I think Suffocation is so cool because it's like, it's not often that you get a song that succeeds on being heavy and really funky at the same time. And there's so much groove. The guitar and bass riffs are just absolutely sick. I mean, those two guys work together just as well, I think, as Gilbert and Sheehan. You got Torpe doing all this really intricate stuff underneath. Kotzen just shreds on this. Sheehan also solos. I mean, and it's like, if you haven't seen it, there's a live version on YouTube that's like 7 or 8 minutes long. It's absolutely mind blowing.
Right.
And what I love about it is like you've got Eric and Richie singing co-lead vocals. And I mean, let's face it, Richie Kotzen could sing lead vocals for Mr. Big. I mean, he's that good of a singer.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's great hearing the both of them together. Great song. I love Suffocation. Could have even ranked higher. It's easily my favorite song off that album, which is a pretty strong record anyway. So that's my number 7.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I go back to I think Richard Kotzen just really is so underrated, just musically. I mean, like he really is. He can do it
You can do it
all.
all. You can do it
God,
all.
I saw a video. I was just mentioning this to somebody the other day. It was actually his birthday, and Billy Sheehan got him like one of his signature basses, and it was this video that he posted on Instagram, and he tore that bass up. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. It was insane. And sometimes he just pulls stuff like that. He was like, thanks for the birthday present, Billy. I was like, whoa, like, whoa, that was crazy. But he's just amazing. And he can vocally, he can do the bass, he's just all around amazing. So I go on and on about Richard Kotzen because I think he's awesome.
Yeah, he is.
So
He is.
I agree that it's a really good record, and I love that song. My number 6 is gonna be "Promise Her the Moon" from Bump Ahead. Oh boy, another ballad. Wow, are we shocked?
That's a good one.
It's a good one. It's a good one. And to me, I think obviously the most important part of a ballad is a lot of the melody. And this one hooked me. And the first time I remember I heard it, it just hooked me in from the very first chord. It has a kind of like echoey guitar intro and a really memorable chorus, super catchy, and honestly just all around kind of what you would want out of a ballad at that time period. Again, I think Eric's vocals on this are great. He does those tracks vocally amazing. So I think all around it's a great ballad. So that's going to be my number 6 from Bump Ahead.
Yeah, and again, we talked about this in the last video we did on Bad Company. So, To Be With You was a huge hit for this band. And again, early 90s. But then, they kept kind of going back to that well again on subsequent albums, but those singles never really did the same impact because by then it's like everybody's listening to Nirvana and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and all those other bands. And it's just like, a band like this who had, a fair amount of success with their first 2-3 albums. By that, like 92, 93, 94, 95, it's like that same type of stuff the general public aren't listening to anymore and they're not latching onto, which is a real shame because I think that the band after that second album, they could have been really, really huge. Maybe if they'd come out a couple of years earlier.
Yeah.
You have to think of those first 2-3 albums, if they started like in 86 or 85, 86, 87 instead of 89 and moving quickly into the 90s, I think that Mr. Big would have been bigger had they come out a couple of years earlier.
Yeah, I mean, like that song, I think about this a lot, even with songs that come out today, honestly. Like even because we all know I wrote my entire senior thesis about how rock isn't in like the mainstream anymore as it used to be, and I think we all know that, unfortunately. But I think about this all the time with newer songs and even songs from that weird area of if that song came out in like 1987 or 88.
Huge.
It would have been insane. It would have been insane. And I think about that a lot with a lot of different songs from then, and even a lot of like I thought about that like with the Black Swan record that came out this year, that has like that type of sound. And it's like if some of these songs came out during the late 80s, mid to late 80s, they would have been, enormous. So I think that
business, yeah,
Mr. Big had a lot of those types of tracks that would have been, I feel like, a lot bigger if they came out before.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, it's not in the mainstream, although rock still is
alive
and kicking, but
it's still there. It's still there. I wish it's funny as like a 21-year-old person, I wish, I see what other people my age listen to and I'm like, could you guys please just put on a Bad Company record, please? Or like something, but yeah, it's interesting kind of seeing though just how times change, and of course this was a play of how times changed, so
yeah,
for sure.
All right, what number are we up? 6, right? All right, so I'm gonna go back to that first album from 1989, Mr. Big, for Take a Walk.
Good one.
Great song, right? Again, another real groovalicious rock song. Some wild Paul Gilbert guitar riffs on this particular song. I think Take a Walk is one of their few albums that you could almost say approaches heavy metal, right? Because this is pretty much just a hard rock band with some blues and pop leanings. But I think
Yeah.
if you're ever going to call any of their songs metal, Take a Walk might be close to it. Basically because I think he's sounding a little more metallic and just big riffarama on that song, and then there's a bit of shred on that song too. So I dig it. It's always one of my favorites from the band. So Take a Walk from the first album.
Yeah. I'm gonna be also touching on the first album for my number five. I'm gonna be going with "Addicted to the Rush," which is the first song off of that record. And we talked about before how great I think this band was. Of course, with a lot of their opening tracks, and this was no different. This was one of their biggest hits at the time. Arguably, it was I know it charted somewhere on the Billboard charts, and I know that it's like a staple live that they do and everything like that. So I love this song. It's probably one of the more heavier songs on that record, and kind of in general. It's really kind of just fast paced, up tempo, kind of like similarly to how I feel like Undertow makes you feel, and getting into the record, which
Yeah.
is funny because I feel like they channeled a lot of that, early kind of debut energy and that later record that we saw here. So I love that song. Again, really gets you really into the rest of the record. So yeah, my number five is going to be "Addicted to the Rush" off of the first record.
Yeah, I will say I'll probably should talk about it later, but I'll just say it now because I remember when this album came out in '89, so I was 23, and well familiar with Paul Gilbert because, of course, he was in Racer X, and he was kind of like
Yeah.
one of those shred guys that those neoclassical shred guys who was around at the time. And of course, had been following Billy Sheehan since his Talus days, and I had seen, of course, he played with David Lee Roth, and and then this album came out, and I remember we were all like, okay, cool, Mr. Big. I'm like, those two guys together. I didn't really know who Eric Martin was. I wasn't really familiar with Pat Torpe. And I remember buying that on cassette and putting that in, and that song came on. I was like, wow. It's like, holy cow. I mean, that made an impact. And that's what this band did. Like their first song on every album is like so good. And that's what you need, right? You got to grab that listener right off the bat. And I remember thinking like, I mean, that's like a pure shred song. Unfortunately, the rest of the album is maybe not quite as intense as that, with
Yeah.
the exception of maybe Big Love. But man, what a first impression it made on a young 23-year-old at the time. So all right, my number five. Let's go to the Get Over It album from 1999 for a song called Static.
Nice.
This is Static is great. This is Kotzen's first album with the band. Kick-ass song. Richie sings lead on it, and it, like I said before, it almost sounds like Richie could have sang the lead vocals on the entire album. I mean, it just sounds. If you've been familiar with Richie's solo career, this just sounds like a Kotzen solo track. It's just
Yeah.
really good. It's just this great wild funky metal song with loads of bass and intricate drums and those great riffs and licks from Kotzen. Just a great song. I love it, and it's catchy as hell, which most of this stuff is. So, little love for the Get Over It album, Static.
Yeah. If I'm correct, I think he might have actually written that by himself, if I'm correct.
And I
'Cause
brought it to the band. He might have, yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely, I totally know what you mean. It sounds like just like a Richie song by itself. Great track, great choice. That's honestly, again, I go back to just, I feel like those two records were just kind of forgotten a little bit. Also, I guess because of the time. But I mean, they're strong. I mean, I definitely not, I guess, my favorites in the catalog. But I mean, for what they were, I think that they were super strong. So if nobody's listened to them, I definitely recommend that you go
And
back and do so.
I don't even remember if those, because I remember at the time, like these guys, they weren't touring here anymore, but I know they were doing big business in Japan because you remember,
Yeah.
like in the late '80s, early 2000s, a lot of these hard rock and metal bands who normally would have been selling records and touring here, obviously nobody was interested. So they were all going over and releasing albums and playing in Japan and
Yeah.
doing huge business. So, I mean, those two albums with him on it, I don't even know if they were ever released officially here at the time, if I remember correctly, because it's like, unless you were really following it, you had no idea they even came out. You'd see them
Yeah, I
maybe in the
mean,
import rack somewhere, right? That was about it.
yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, I would have no idea at the time I was being born. So I'm not 100% sure. But they might have. I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like even if you're not like a super, I don't know. I don't want to say you have to be like a diehard Mr. Big fan, but I guess you have to know a little bit more about the band, typically to like know about some of those albums. But I definitely think, yeah, if nobody's listened to them, I'd definitely recommend it,
Yeah,
especially
they're good. They're really good.
Cotton, yeah. So my number four, we're on number four, is going to
Yep.
be a green tinted 60s mind off of Lean Into It. So good. If only for the first line, she just woke up but she's still tired. That's how I feel every morning. I just woke up and I am still tired. Yeah, first time I
Supposed
heard
to
that.
feel refreshed, Sydney. Come on,
Man, I try now. It's the first time I heard that I was like, wow, they understand what's going on in here. Which is just a classic. I mean, obviously one of their bigger songs, but for
Yeah.
a reason. I always go back to singles are big for a reason because they're really great songs. It just has a catchy chorus. It's got a lot of memorable moments in the song, and of course, it was off of Lean Into It. So such a great record. I mean, they're second, so that's gonna be my number four.
More about that in a minute. I'm going to go with my number four, Colorado Bulldog from Bump Ahead from 1993. Another kick-ass opening track.
So good, super heavy too, or
Really
heavier.
heavy and fast, right?
Yeah.
Some great shredding from Gilbert. And then, of course, that great rhythm section. I mean, I think, we probably don't mention these two guys enough as a unit. I think a lot of times when we talk about the great modern rhythm teams, right? Bass and drummers. I think when we think of Billy Sheehan, we think of Billy and Portnoy, right? Who of course play in the Sons of Apollo and the Winery Dogs together. But I think we kind of forget that Sheehan and Torpy really were always really good together. And Pat, God rest his soul. I think those two guys were fantastic together. And this is a heavy song. It's got a lot of groove and tons of shredding. And it's just this great up-tempo, catchy rocker. Like I said, every album of theirs starts off with a bang, and that's the way it should be. So Colorado Bulldog, my number four.
Yeah, this was one of the heavier ones off of them.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's interesting. It's one of those songs that I feel like at first I heard it, I was like, this doesn't quite match their catalog. It's a little like it's a lot heavier.
Yeah.
But that's honestly it's so good, and I completely agree about Billy and Pat, because I feel like that's where it started. Like that relationship and chemistry. So agreed. My number three, we're gonna go with Wild World. Of course, I had to put this on my list. I had to. Cat Stevens is so great. Obviously, this cover. I hope you watching know that this is a cover. Obviously, and I mean, I think that they put such an interesting edge to this because, I mean, obviously they had this kind of 80s metal sound to them, of course, late 80s, early 90s. And I've listened to both the Cat Stevens version and this version, kind of side, and I think they just put such an interesting spin on it. They kept the integrity of the original, but I don't know, I feel like they just really made it their own in a way and kind of made it very like 80s metal-esque and like did a lot of cool stuff with it. So I had to put this on my list. It's just one of those songs where you hear it on the radio and you just can't help but sing along, it's just one of those. So yeah, let's give you my number three, Wild World.
I'd say they did some great covers.
Oh yeah.
That's one of them. I almost put a cover or two in my top 10, and then I made the executive decision that I wasn't going to put any of their covers, even though they're so good. I think at the time, you had them and Government Mule were probably two of the bands from that kind of early mid 90s era that came out who did some great covers on all their albums. Yeah. And, I could throw out a couple others that these guys did, but they made it their own. Arguably, well, people are going to be like, no way, Pardo, but arguably might even be better than the original. I don't know. The original is a great song for what it is, but I love the Mr. Big version.
Yeah, it's one of those songs where I feel like even if you, I don't know, a lot of people might hear it and not even know that, like it was a cover because it's that good. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously, if you're a rock fan, it's a cover. Obviously, Cat Stevens did it. But if you are just maybe don't know too much about that kind of, Cat Stevens as an artist or that earlier era of music, and you were just listening to the song, you probably think it was an original because it was, it's that good. But I love that track, so it's my number three.
And Eric owns it.
Oh yeah.
Big time.
Oh yeah. He's a great voice for it. His tone of his voice matches that song perfectly.
Yeah, I agree. My number three, you've already picked, as I think believe was your number four, Green Tinted 60s
Yeah.
Mind from Lead Into It. It was a minor hit. I think it should have been a massive hit. And they had the video, and I think it started to pick up steam, and then they went with the other song, obviously, which did big business for them. But I think Green Tinted 60s Mind was the first single that they released, and I remember like totally digging. I still really dig it. It's just a really like kind of fun slice of like pop metal
Yeah.
with like that flower power feel, because that's what they were kind of going for. And it's just a really fun, like kind of feel good song, right? It's kind of quirky, I think. So yeah, it should have been huge for them. I think most the fans love that song, obviously. But yeah, really good. It's my number three. I love it.
Yeah, it goes back to also what you were saying about they were just like a very upbeat kind of feel good band, and I think that that song definitely kind of encapsulates that vibe of them. They were just kind of always like a party band, fun band to listen to, not I mean obviously there are some songs that have a little bit more in-depth listening, but with them I feel like it was just kind of a fun band to listen to, and that's a good song.
Yeah, yeah.
Um my number two, we're going back to the first record for my last two songs, actually. My number two is going to be Had Enough off of the first song. Such, oh, so good. It's so memorable to me, just that chorus. Again, very melodic. If you couldn't tell, I like stuff with melody. It's just gonna keep the theme's gonna keep recurring. But I just love songs that really just get in your head like that. To me, so catchy the first time I heard it. I remember it just stuck in my head, and I can even like singing the chorus in my head right now because it's that catchy. But honestly, one of the standout tracks of that album for me, it's really hard because I think that that album is probably their best in my opinion, probably my favorite if I had to pick one. Debatable between that and the second
Yeah, I wouldn't
record,
argue it. Yeah, absolutely.
but I think that the first one for me is just leans a little bit more so to my favorite. But I love that song, so I had to put it on my list as number two.
It's got a good, gutsy, emotional vocal from Eric, I think,
Yeah.
too. He's got a little bit of an edge on that first album that I'm not sure he kind of equals on some of the other albums. Yeah, great
Yeah.
singer. I mean, he's just, and it's a great song. I totally dig it. I'm going to go to the second album for my number two, Lean Into It. Your daddy, your brother, your lover, and your little boy. The electric drill song, right? Yeah, again, another great opener. God, how many openers did I pick on this list? It's crazy. There's so many of them. Good hard rock and opener, pulls you right in. That sick exchange between those two guys on power drills. I mean, come on. I mean, that was kind of cool at the time to see them do something like that. Great drumming from Pat on that song. It's just a killer track. And again, another song that they kind of tried to push as a single. I think did they do I'm pretty sure they did a video on that one too. I'm trying to remember, there's so many damn MTV videos that all these bands did, but great song. Love it. I like the album. Again, those first two albums, really classic in my opinion, the best in their catalog, and really not any bad songs on either one of those albums. So that's my number two.
Yeah, and that's another fun one. Like they just have like this just habit of just doing like fun songs, and like just a fun one that almost made my list. It's in my honorable mentions, but I think that's a good pick for number two. My number one, I'm gonna go with the song that you had on your list earlier. I'm gonna have Big Love as my number one, which I don't know, maybe surprising as a number one, but I that's one of the songs that I listened to that album. I like replayed that one just over and over and over
Great.
again.
Yep.
It's so good. It does have that bit of a heavier edge, still a lot of melody, and probably, obviously, it's my number one. So probably the most memorable on that album for me personally. Just so good. I know that we described a little bit in depth on it earlier. So yeah, it's my number one. It's just so good.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. My number one, we talked about it earlier, Addicted to That Rush from the
Yeah,
debut. I mean, they just crush it right out of the gate. And for me, what I always loved about that song and still love about that song is it combines their kind of like their pop tunefulness, their soul with shred, with
yeah,
crazy heaviness, and all those backing vocals, man. I mean, it's just like, you got Eric singing the lead, you got Billy and Paul doing the backing vocals, and just it's like it's a song where everything they do well is all in that song, and it kicks off the album in a great way. And it's the first song I ever heard by them, and it's still my favorite song by them to this day.
yeah. It's a good one, man. It's a good one. And those backing vocals for sure. That's another thing I forgot to mention on Had Enough. Like that so many songs on that first record. I mean, even just in general as a band, like I felt like those backing vocals were just so strong and added so much to the songs.
Yep.
So I completely agree with that.
Yeah. Good
Yeah.
stuff. Do you have any honorable mentions you want to throw out?
Honestly, a couple of them were on your list. If I could find my list. You know what? We're just gonna say all the ones that were on your list that I mentioned. Those are gonna be my honorable mentions. I mean, they had so many good songs off of those first two records. I mean, honestly, even the third record, not I don't think as strong as the first two, but I think still had some great songs on them. So it's kind of hard to pick and narrow it down. So anything I didn't mention off of the first two records, an honorable mention.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote down a bunch, but I'm just gonna
Yeah.
throw a couple out there. So I'm not a huge fan of the Hey Man album, but I do like Trapped in Toyland. That's a pretty good song.
Yeah, it's
Take Cover is also pretty good with that on that album. From the Get Over It album, Hiding Place is really good. What else? From What If, American Beauty is pretty good. What else we got here? How about Satisfied from The Stories We Could Tell? That's
yeah.
pretty strong. And from that first album, I love Merciless. I love Wind Me Up. Lucky This Time is great from the second album. My Kind of Woman, another really good song. Road to Ruin, man. I mean, there's so many good ones. I could just go on and on and on. But Open Your Eyes from Defying Gravity. So, that's a lot of good songs here. A lot of good songs throughout their catalog. They got a lot of albums. And, for me, some of the albums are a little bit spotty, but they've got those couple really strong early. The first three albums are really good. Then there's a lot of good material from the middle albums. And the last couple albums have been really strong, too. So,
Yeah.
good stuff.
Agreed.
Really good band. Yeah. If you haven't, if you've never kind of taken the plunge into Mr. Big, I would say definitely go check out, lean into it, and the Mr. Big self-titled first album. Those are probably easily the strongest albums, but third album's really good too. And the What If album from 2010 is also really good. So a lot of good songs. And did this band ever put out I think they might have put out a greatest hits collection like
I think that they did. Yeah, I
a
think
long time ago, but probably like really early on, right?
I think yeah, if I remember, I know that they did. It might only be with songs from like the first two or three records,
Yeah.
or maybe up until like the late 90s, early 2000s or something like that. They maybe put something together. But I know that there definitely is one. So if you even don't want to invest in all the albums and you just want to get a greatest hits one, there's one out there too. So
Yeah.
for sure.
But you might be missing some of these great songs that Sydney and I talked about today. So go.
Yeah. So you better go and buy them. Support your artists,
That's
I
right.
threaten you to support them. No.
So there you have it, everybody. Our 10 favorite tracks from Mr. Big. For those of you watching, if you are a fan, let's hear what your favorite songs are. So in the comments below, give us your top 5, your top 10, top 20, whatever you want to do. Put them down below. We'll be checking them out. We'll be commenting on your comments. And remember, there's no right or wrong answers here. We all hear these songs differently, right? So coming up on the channel, geez, what do we got? Well, Sydney and I will be back together on Monday night with the rest of the Hudson Valley Squares. We've got a very interesting discussion coming up on Monday, all about our listening and viewing habits. So we're all going to be talking about, when we digest music, do we buy CDs? Do we listen to stuff on satellite? Do we stream on Spotify? Do we buy digital downloads? Same thing about movies, all that kind of stuff. So, do we prefer physical streaming, digital? How do we do this whole thing we call, listening to music, buying music, all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be a whole discussion. Each of us are going to kind of talk about how we do this, right? In this day and age where technology is changing everything we do. So that'll be Monday night, and all sorts of stuff happening on the show. What do we got? Martin Popoff and I will be here together Friday morning to talk about some of the 5 albums that we think are absolutely perfect albums start to finish. So that's coming up Friday morning. Tomorrow, Butch Jones is coming on the show with me. We are going to be talking about some of our favorite album closers Okay, those kick-ass songs that finish up some really cool albums. So there's that and all sorts of other things happening too. Lynn Versace and I are going to be talking about on Sunday those soft and mellow songs from really heavy bands. Some of our favorites there. And then Rich Catino and I will be ranking the albums of Candlemass on Sunday. So all that and more here on the channel. Make sure you check out Sydney wants to talk about the podcast a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm sure guys, a lot of you know by now, but I have my own podcast. It's called Metal from the Inside. I can go to www.metalfromtheinside.com. All of the links are there. I just had Jolyn Turner on, which you can go ahead and watch the interview if you'd like. You can just type in Metal from the Inside, Jolyn Turner, subscribe if you'd like to our YouTube channel. And I'm going to have Michael Schenker on the podcast this Friday. So if you love UFO, Michael Schenker, which I'm sure many of you do, please stick around and stay tuned for that. But yeah, we got a lot of cool guests coming up. So
that's awesome. And Michael's new album is dropping on Friday. So
yeah, on Friday it's gonna be perfect timing. Yeah.
Perfect
Timing. Oh my God. My Macaulay Schenker fans. If you
I did not do that on purpose. That is
oh man, that happened. Oh my God. I spoke to Mitch Perry, who played on that record with them. And he said something and I was like, that's perfect timing. And he was just like, okay. So I make that joke a lot, but that was perfectly timed. So there you go.
Absolutely, totally, right? I love that album, by the way.
Oh, it's so good. Oh, so good.
I love Michael. I'm a big fan. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll be really cool.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool.
So see, guys, you got all this stuff to catch up on and stuff that's coming up. So stay tuned and visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube.
All the damn time.
There you go. All right. All the damn time. So for Sydney Taylor, I'm Pete Pardo. We'll see you guys real soon. Have a good one, everybody.
See you guys.